We appreciate you all being here today. We are here today with local, state, and federal law enforcement, as well as various divisions of the military, to announce that we are unsealing several indictments. These are multi-defendant indictments charging inmates at the Department of Corrections and individuals on the outside. We have a total of 5 indictments charging 15 defendants. We have copies of the indictments for you, which lay out the allegations of a scheme in which Department of Correction inmates went on dating sites and posed as women seeking a dating relationship with members of the military. After meeting the military servicemen on the website, the allegation is that the inmate would then send them nude pictures of young women, the pictures they had obtained through the internet. According to the indictment, the inmate would then ask for nude pictures in return. Later, after the exchange of the pictures, the inmate would call the serviceman, claiming to be the father of the young woman. He would tell the serviceman, according to the indictment, that the woman was underage, and that unless the serviceman paid him some money, he would notify military authorities. You can read further details of this in the indictment. We cannot comment, of course, on an ongoing case, but again, the indictments contain much more information about these allegations. Our purpose in being here today is to sound the alarm that these kinds of scams are a significant threat to our military and to the citizens of South Carolina. These indictments are just one step in holding these inmates and the defendants on the outside who allegedly assisted accountable. We do not lock up criminals only to have them go to prison and continue their criminal conduct. It is the unfettered use of contraband cell phones that allows inmates to continue harming the citizens of South Carolina. I am very proud to stand with our law enforcement partners. While the prosecution will be led by Emily Limehouse in our office, an assistant U.S. attorney, these indictments are the result of excellent work by our law enforcement partners. I would like to thank the Naval Criminal Investigative Services, Army CID, Air Force OSI, the Department of Defense Criminal Investigative Services, the IRS Criminal Investigations, the U.S. Marshal, SLED, and of course, the South Carolina Department of Corrections. As I turn it over to NCIS, let me state that the allegations in the indictment are merely allegations at this point. The defendants are presumed innocent. We stand ready at the U.S. Attorney's Office to move forward and secure convictions in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Lydon. Good morning. I'm Special Agent in Charge Drew Goodridge from the Carolinas Field Office of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. This morning, agents, analysts, and law enforcement personnel from numerous South Carolina and North Carolina local agencies, as well as the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the South Carolina Department of Corrections, the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigations, the United States Marshal Service, the Department of Energy, Defense Criminal Investigative Service, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, Army Criminal Investigation Command, and Naval Criminal Investigative Service, after the indictment of 15 individuals, executed 5 arrest warrants, served 5 summonses, and interviewed 5 inmates throughout South Carolina and North Carolina for money laundering, extortion, and wire fraud tied to what is known as a sextortion ring. South Carolina inmates, aided by outside civilian associates, identified and targeted military service members through social media forums and online dating websites. The prisoners, using fictitious online personas, preyed on service members to engage in online romantic relationships and then extort those service members for money. Prisoners used various social media platforms and dating sites posing as a female, exchanging pictures with service members. After the service member responded, prisoners would then assume the role of the female's father, who claimed the female was a juvenile. Prisoners would also assume the role of a police officer or someone in a position of authority demanding money on behalf of the family in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges through law enforcement channels. Military members would then pay, fearful that they might lose their careers over possessing what they were led to believe was child pornography. These online social schemes cost 442 service members from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps across the United States more than $560,000 in financial loss. This is the first phase of Operation Surprise Party, which NCIS initiated in January 2017. There are more than 250 additional people who are being investigated and face potential future prosecution. This operation will continue until we break the back of these criminal networks. The message should be loud and clear. Anyone who targets our military service members will be investigated and pursued for criminal prosecution. We value the safety of military men and women, and we will use every resource available to ensure that these criminal networks are destroyed. I would like to thank all of our law enforcement partners for their dedication and assistance in helping protect our military service members. This operation was successful because of the incredible collaboration between all agencies. Thank you. I will now turn the podium over to Special Agent in Charge Matthew Lyon with the IRS CI.
Hey, good morning. My name is Matthew Lyon. I am the Special Agent in Charge of the Charlotte Field Office for the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation. Before I make my remarks, I do want to thank United States Attorney Sherry Leiden for giving me a few moments to make some comments. As has been stated today, IRS criminal investigation stands shoulder to shoulder with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners to announce the indictments and the arrests of 15 individuals in both North and South Carolina for their roles in various rings focused on extorting and defrauding U.S. service members, then laundering that money to disguise the nature and the source of that to use for their personal gain. The scheme was orchestrated by prison inmates who obtained contraband cell phones and then used this to access the internet and set a trap for these U.S. service members to extort them from, as was mentioned, $560,000 or approximately $560,000. Now, these prison inmates, they did not act alone. They utilized friends and family members outside of prison in order to assist them in laundering these illegal proceeds. In order to hide their true identities, obtain the extorted proceeds, and spend these illegally gotten gains, these prisoners and the recruited individuals, they set up and used a network of bank accounts, money transfer services, online payment services, prepaid debit and credit cards to access that money and spend that money. IRS criminal investigation is committed to dedicating resources to investigations that focus on destructive criminal activity while making the most effective use of our skill set as financial investigators. We continue to use our expertise to diligently follow the money and to peel back the layers of these financial frauds and to expose those that violate the law and defraud others. We will continue to work closely with the United States Attorney's Office and our federal, state, and local partners to disrupt and dismantle groups like this and organizations that seek to victimize and defraud others for their own financial gain. I do want to thank our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners. This was a true collaborative effort, and the success could not be done without everybody. So thank you, and I'd like to turn the time over to the U.S. Marshal Service. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. I'm Tom Griffin, United States Marshal for the District of South Carolina. I'd like to start by thanking and recognizing NCIS for their dedication. They led this investigation for the past 2 years. It'll be 2 years in January. And for their time and resources that they dedicated to this very worthy cause as well. As stated this morning by Mr. Goodridge, at the time that was predetermined, we effectively and simultaneously made the arrest in this investigation. We served the summons that had been previously planned upon, and those arrests were conducted with no incident, without incident. And at the appropriate time, those individuals will be taken before a federal magistrate, and they will continue in the process. The crimes that we're discussing this morning, the crimes that you've heard described by everyone that's come to the podium before me, is only one of many criminal enterprises that I am personally aware of that's being not only managed, they're also being operated, and they're being supervised by institutions just like the one behind me. They're being controlled by prison inmates, and they're able to do this, they're able to continue these criminal enterprises because they have access to these cell phones that are in fact contraband. Director Brian Sterling on numerous occasions has addressed this, not just here within the state of South Carolina, but also in Washington, D.C. The technology exists, and I know it exists, to make these cell phones of no value, to make them useless, to make them nothing more than a paperweight in a cell block. Director Sterling needs the relief and assistance from Washington, D.C. to implement this technology to shut these cell phones down. And I hope the people in Washington that are standing in Director Sterling's way will come on board and be a partner in this initiative. And again, I want to thank all the agencies, and I especially want to thank the U.S. Attorney's Office for providing the necessary prosecutorial resources that will be needed, not only in this investigation, but as Mr. Goodridge indicated, any subsequent investigations. The U.S. Marshal Service stands at the ready. We will be a partner. We have been a partner. We will continue to be a partner as these cases move forward. At this time, I'll turn it over to Director Brian Sterling.
Good morning, I'm Brian Sterling, Director of the Department of Corrections. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank U.S. Attorney Lydon, Assistant U.S. Attorney Limehouse, the IRS, the military investigators, and the Marshal Service. Y'all have heard me talk about these cell phones numerous occasions, numerous times. I've lost track how many times I've had to talk about these cell phones and the problems that they cause. I've asked Captain Robert Johnson, who you will see over here to my right, who is a living, breathing example of how dangerous these cell phones are. He was a contraband captain at Lee Correctional, and he was shot in his house, point blank range, 6 times. You're just seeing another example. Every week, every month, we see another example of why these cell phones should be blocked in our prison system. You see the netting that we have behind us here. That's about almost $1 million just for this facility of netting, and we have to do it at every facility, level 2 and level 3, to stop the throwovers. We're having to invest in technology. We're having to hire more officers. We're having to hire more SCDC police investigators. What the citizens of South Carolina need to know, and the citizens of this country need to know, is that folks that they read about in the front pages of the paper and they hear about the guilty verdicts are coming to the departments of corrections across this country. They're physically incarcerated, but as you see today, virtually they're out there among us. They're on the internet. They're able to continue their schemes from behind bars and continue their criminal ways. Unfettered access to the outside world needs to stop. We need relief, and we need it now before more tragedies like Captain Johnson occur. So I just want to end this by thanking everybody and call on Washington, call on Congress to have hearings to find out how dangerous these cell phones are in the hands of inmates. Thank you all very much. And I think if anybody has any quick questions that we can answer, I think we'd be happy to answer any.
So what's the timeline here? When did this scam
NCIS opened this investigation with our fellow military criminal investigation organizations back in January, but our organizations have been monitoring and tracking this particular sextortion cybercrime trend for several years prior to the opening of the operation. It's been a pervasive problem where we saw an opportunity to work to help protect our service members who have been victimized by these criminals.
How were you made aware of the crimes going on? Was it servicemen coming to law enforcement, telling them about this extortion? How did you all find out about it?
So for NCIS, which I'll speak on behalf of our agency, yes, we do have service members who report, but also our agency is very diligent working with all Navy and Marine Corps commands globally, and we work to provide education prevention awareness briefs so that we hope, and this is a message that I want to relay, is that there are other victims out there who have likely not reported. So we hope that any Navy, any sailor or Marine who has been victimized by a scheme like this, please report it to NCIS.
Are there other state prison systems involved in this scheme or similar schemes?
I'm not going to answer any questions outside of what's in the indictments that are presented this morning.
Were the victims enlisted men and officers, or just enlisted men?
The victims range from all ranks.
Including the higher ranks. And is this military bases all over the country that they came from? Like Fort Bragg, Camp Lejeune, Fort Jackson, Shaw Air Force Base?
I can speak on behalf of the Department of the Navy that we've had Marines and sailors from bases from all over the country.
Can you give us an idea of the amount that was paid by individuals, what it ranged from, what kind of money we're talking about?
The total thus far that we've calculated is $560,000, and it ranges, in individual denominations based upon the victim itself.
Will there be any disciplinary consequences for the military personnel who've been caught up in this scheme? The sailors and Marines who were victimized in this crime committed no crimes themselves.
Do you know where they were getting these nude photos of younger females? Was it just online? Is that part of the investigation?
Yeah, I will not answer that question outside of what's already presented in the indictment. Thank you.
Prisons need to be wrapped with this protective that'll block the cell phone uses. How many more prisons?
Well, this is not blocking the cell phone. This is blocking the throwover. So we have a managed access system at Lee Correctional that we've been piloting, and we've announced that we're going to do 2 more. That's simply, our fencing with the Constantine wire is about 12 feet. That's 50 feet, so that's 48 feet above, so it makes it harder. We were getting a lot of throwovers, and they were using their cell phones to coordinate the throwovers. They would say, okay, the rover, outside security, perimeter security was here or there, so you can come in, and they also were paying for it using their cell phones. So we're going to do about 12 prisons with this netting. I think we're close to done. The managed access is quite expensive, and it's just more money, more tax dollars that we have to pay when there's a simple solution. So
Has it been successful?
the netting has been very successful.
No, I'm talking about the managed access.
The managed access, yes, it's still early in this, in the trial. So, but we're happy with it. That's why we're going to move it to 2 more prisons. We have not announced where those prisons are yet, but we're going to move it to 2 more maximum security prisons.
Director Sterling, what are you hearing from Congress, from D.C.? I mean, you've been up there a number of times.
I have.
Talking to these people. Where are you getting with them lately?
Well, so I'll say this. For the first time, with a lot of public pressure, the cell phone industry has come to the table, and y'all are familiar with our working group. We're working with them to come up with a solution. They've done testing on the managed access system at Lee Correctional, and they've done testing at a place in Texas. So we're waiting on that report, which should be done in the middle of next month to the end of this year, and we will see. But I know what the solution is, and that's jamming. I mean, the federal prisons can do it. I don't understand why we can't do it. So there's interest in D.C., but I think they may be waiting for this report, and when this report comes out, I'm going to go back up there and I'm going to ask our congressional delegation to get going and start moving, so we don't have another person like Captain Johnson over here, another officer. I know there was a U.S. attorney, family that was kidnapped in North Carolina. I think there was a hit on a child in Atlanta. this has real world consequences. This is not, people just on the internet or whatever. I mean, as you're seeing today, this is real world consequences with folks that have been put behind bars to make society safer, and no longer can we say that they're behind bars, but they're out there virtually amongst us with children and stuff.
Since they're targeting federal employees now, i.e. military, do you think that's going to get more notice on Capitol Hill because it's starting to bleed into those areas of their notice?
I can only hope so.
Have you been able to figure out what they're using this money for that they're getting from these service members?
I can't answer that. That'd be a question for someone else. I'm not sure they want to get into that. Well, good. Why don't you answer then if I haven't?
Again, the answer to that question is a great question, but we're not going to go into any investigative details outside of the indictment.
Out of the service warrants and former chief servicemen, any ratio or percentage of how many of them were here in South Carolina, the victims?
I don't have that information top of my head.
You said Marines and sailors, so that means no Army, no Coast Guard, just Marines and Navy?
No, it's
You're just
affected.
answering for the Marines.
I'm just answering for the Department of the Navy. So yes, but it has affected all services.
Is it all male or any of the service members female? It's only directed at males.
Primary targets have been males.
Can you talk about what apps they were using to target these members?
Now, those are investigative details that I will not share.
Is there a civilian side besides the 400, or do I have to imagine they were going after civilians?
Yes.
All right, we'll just take one more question if anybody's got one. Can you talk about what the managed access, what that is exactly?
So managed access system, so there's blocking, which basically you just shut the door and you never open it again. Managed access would allow some phone calls to go through, official phone calls would go through, but the ones that are not on a list would not be allowed to go through. And of course, if you have to have someone manage that, there's going to be a higher expense. Also, what we found out from these meetings in DC with some of the experts is when these cell phone companies change their frequency, just say they go from ABC to XYZ, sometimes the managed access doesn't work, so you've got to work closely with the engineers in that area. On blocking, it blocks from A to Z. And that just, to me, is just basic and simple, and I'm not quite sure why we can't do it.
Is there any concern, I'm sorry, this is just a follow-up to this, is there any concern,
She said one more question. Yeah.
if, you get the jamming capability that people that, let's say guards or whatever, that if there's an emergency, they need to call out that they wouldn't be able to for some reason?
So our officers use radios, and that would not be a block signal. Cap, you want to say
Say
something?
something about money.
Yeah, come on. If you want to come on up. It's Captain Robert Johnson. He's the one I was referencing a little while ago.
People
Take your
said
hat
the
off.
managed access is expensive, but I'm here to tell you the last 8 years, the state has paid well over what it would cost for one of these systems for my care, and it's continuing. What they paid for my care could have probably furnished the whole system statewide. And I'm talking one hospital, when I first got her, it was $880-some thousand for 30 days. And it's been more than that now. So it would pay for it.
And just to be clear, he wasn't hurt. He was assaulted. Somebody tried to murder him. So thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here.